that they are good. Well, too late
Say
now.
hello now. Hello, everyone. And the music begins.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Welcome to another episode of Go Time. My name is Natalie. I'm very happy to be back from my European vacation, which does not mean a vacation that took place in Europe, but vacation that was long and throughout the entire summer. And Go Time is great because today Johnny and Kris are joining me to ask for everybody to share their thoughts, but also to ask V about prototyping. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing well. Did you delete all of your emails upon your return from vacation?
I never had emails. It's just, you can do like stop accepting emails.
Oh,
You can? Please do share. How?
You can do it. I think it's one of the. No, I did not do that, but I saw that as an option that you can block that on Gmail, just rejecting. Same as when your inbox is full.
return to sender. Okay.
Return to sender. Nice.
Your email
nice.
would be archived and don't write again. Don't follow up.
We artisanally compost our emails when we return from vacation because it's sustainable.
Every byte carefully selected.
In the pre-show part, we were making jokes about my cat Java, who is named after the coffee beans. But actually, as we said, she's living up to her name, being not very efficient as a cat, let's say.
Yeah,
Shots
we
fired.
were asking. We were
Yeah, it's a
asking
great time to
Natalie,
bring
why
up the
why
topic.
isn't your cat named
Yeah.
Go? Why is your cat named Java?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
and
she's
and
not
then Natalie
she's not
left to
efficient.
lock the cat away because it's a Go podcast, so the cat can't participate. It's just illegal.
I mean, the cat was trying very hard to participate.
Mhm.
Yeah. In, so yeah, Java for prototyping, yes, no? What do we think about that? If we talk about prototyping this episode and we already talk about Java, let's not start with your. Is Java a good language for prototyping? Has anybody
Well,
prototyped with Java?
I used Java the last time 5 years ago for about 3 months, and it was
Mhm.
not. So that's my assessment.
I feel like maybe the JVM, like if you're using some Clojure, some Kotlin, maybe some Scala, those seem like languages that are fun to prototype in. But Java itself, I don't know about that.
Well, perhaps we should define what you need out of a language, any language, in order for it to be deemed prototype worthy.
So would you look in a language for that?
Speed. Don't hinder me. Don't get in my way. Don't force me to define types ahead of time. Because I'm just spitballing. I'm experimenting. I don't know yet what my types are gonna be. I just want to munch some data and see what pops out.
So dynamic
Interesting.
typing as opposed to static typing is what you kind of want to do when you're doing the prototyping thought process and just kind of spin some code out onto the page.
Yeah, yeah. I don't worry. I
Interesting.
don't worry about types yet.
Going back to Java, one thing is something that makes it easier to prototype is using an environment that is not very verbose or does not require a lot of scaffolding beforehand. Because to me, that was the problem. Going back to Java, that it needed too much setup before I could get to the part that I wanted.
Who's doing the echo?
I think it is Johnny was echoing for a moment there.
It was me. I took off my headset. Now I'm back on echoless.
I wrote that in the show notes that skip this part. Cool. You were saying. Prototyping and dynamic types. Yeah, that makes sense.
I
So
think
what other
too,
requirements?
having some sort of like REPL environment, or just like a environment that's fast to reload or fast to like see your changes happen. Because even if you have like a language that's dynamically typed, if it takes 5 minutes to compile, then prototyping is going to be a much slower process than it might be if you can have quick feedback loops, which is the thing you're aiming for more or less with prototyping. You just kind of want to get something down on the page and see if it works and then iterate from there.
I asked the internet, and
Oh boy,
I don't know. People people seem to think Python is the bee's knees for prototyping. And if we're gonna do that, then let's toss Ruby in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Might
these
as well.
things are. Yeah.
Ruby, PHP, Python.
Did you say
Ruby and
PHP?
Python showed up in the answers to a tweet where I had about this.
I think PHP is a good.
Find Python there, but Ruby was a surprise bit.
I feel like PHP is a pretty decent language to do some prototyping in.
Okay,
Maybe not the best. But
nothing against PHP, but I don't like. Does PHP have a REPL? I think having a
yeah.
REPL is also kind of like. I think if you can launch a REPL, I'd toss that in a quick prototyping sort of.
I believe
help.
that there's a REPL like environment. I guess the nature of PHP too is that just like page loads. So it's like, I don't know, just kind of Command R that or Control R, refresh the page, boom. But I do think that I haven't written PHP in a very long time, but I do feel like there was probably some sort of like REPL like environment.
But if I have to refresh the page, I lose my
What does
context.
REPL mean?
Read, evaluate,
Read, eval,
print, loop.
print, loop. Right.
Okay.
If I have to refresh a page, though, I lose my contacts. Like I need a running history. I need to reference a variable I declared 5 buffer 5 buffers ago or something.
There is in fact an interactive shell for PHP. So
there is. Okay.
There's a REPL you can have.
Okay.
But I think any of these like dynamic webby languages are pretty good for prototyping. Definitely Python, definitely Ruby. I would throw like Clojure in there as well, even though it runs on the JVM, because it once again is very REPL like dynamic typing, and it's a Lisp, and Lisp are nice for prototyping and roughing stuff out.
Mary, everything except JavaScript. Do we all hate JavaScript for prototyping?
Is it
V,
time?
you want to jump in and say something?
Yeah. Is it time for polemic opinions yet?
Please drop them in.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I was just thinking about languages, and I kind of forgot everything I worked on the past few years because bad memory, had too much coffee today. But then y'all started talking about REPL and whatever the hell that is. I'm too old for those new acronyms, but anyway, acronyms, letters. Yeah.
We'll go with that. Yep.
Yeah, letters. Yeah. So anyway, that reminded me that I used to work at developer experience stuff, which I had completely forgot for whatever reason. And a lot of the stuff that I used to give talks about was basically how it is important to have a fast feedback loop. And the language in the end doesn't really matter. What matters is like you need to have a pre-prototype setup that works in your environment. So let's say, what does hello world look like for your setup? And then you need to have a system that's basically watching your code and rebuilding and like refreshing and doing that like faster than you can think about it. So I was working at Tilt before. The company has been bought by Docker. I don't know if anybody's still working on it, probably not. But that's something that we used to do, was just get that feedback loop super fast. and basically you would write a line of code, press save, and then your changes are already there and already live. And I think to me that was a lot more important to make developers happy with fast iteration than the language itself, because the setup problem is always going to come up anyway, because like sometimes you have Kubernetes, or sometimes you have I don't know, Cloud Foundry or whatever the hell you're using, and you need to be able to automate that beforehand. And then you need to integrate that with your systems, which also needs to be a thing beforehand. And like when you get to actual prototyping, I do think that fast iteration velocity is the biggest defining factor to make it less frustrating to. This is supposed to be polemic. You guys are supposed to say, no, shut up. Go is good. Everything else is bad. Go away. You're wearing a Java people's shirt. Shut up.
Nobody sees
I feel
from the listeners, so it's an important data point.
Oh yeah, it's a VMware. See this here? It's a VMware T-shirt. So we're the Java Spring tons of application platform people.
I mean, that's all. I think we're all pragmatic, you know, on this call. We've been around long enough to know there is no such thing as the perfect tool. Right, yeah. Yeah, we've reached a...
No, wait. A podcast where everybody agrees is no fun. So do I need to contradict myself and pick a fight with all of you because you agreed with me before now?
We're going to have to allocate an opinion for each one and just, like a debate, you're going to have to just go with the opinion that you were assigned.
I mean, I guess I could say
zoom in a little bit, right? We can say like one time we'll talk soon about evaluating a product or like doing a prototype for something related to work, and then it has to, you know, maybe fit into a larger thing. But now let's first focus. What if you prototype for fun? You went to a conference, you heard about this cool database, this cool whatever. You want to, I don't know, convince your teammates to even try it on your hacking day or something. So like individual prototyping, what's different in this specific scenario when we zoom in on this one?
I think for me, there's a few things that I always do first before I start prototyping. Those things are it's fun, and before they are, then prototyping sucks. So the first thing is I always have
Berlin internet strikes again. Can't believe I'm the one with not the worst Wi-Fi. It's an honor today.
Oh no.
Well, Ellen will be back soon. Until then, V will be back soon. Until then, what is everybody's thoughts?
I mean, I don't know if that's so much prototyping as exploration of a new thing, but I definitely think when if you want to like demo using a new database or new technology, having a ready to go project. So like, don't try and prototype something new in an area you don't understand. So if you have something you've built before in another language or prototyped in another language, prototyping that same thing in your new language, I think is a pretty good idea, and will help you like move faster and kind of acquire more of the knowledge around that.
You said an interesting thing, like that the differentiation between prototyping and exploration. So maybe we zoom in on prototype or on the definition. I don't know if it's zoom in or out. Let's for a second define what do we mean with prototyping. What do you have in mind when you say that?
I think like when I think of prototyping, I think like I'm trying to rough out a specific idea. Like there's something I know I want to build, and I aim toward that, and I start doing things to get myself there. I think exploration is more kind of just a wandering around, going about, figuring out how stuff works, right? Like when you want to learn a new language, I think that is an exploratory thing. Like, sure, you can have a project, you try to build it in it, but if it doesn't work, then you're like, go do something else. Figure out the kind of area of the space that you're operating within. I think with prototyping, though, you're like, I want to build a specific thing. I want to build a to-do list account or whatever. Those are trivial examples, but an email client, an operating system, whatever it is you want to build. You're like, I want to prototype this specific area. I have a specific idea of what I'm trying to create. So I think like that's it for me, like kind of known quantities versus kind of an unknown quantity.
And
Also, I'm hearing a
prototyping,
slight
it's more like
echo.
having... Again.
I don't know. Is it from Johnny? I don't know who it's from, but I heard a little tiny echo.
So interesting that you say so two things you said for prototyping versus or exploration, right? One is when you have a specific idea, right, that you want to implement versus tinkering around, and then I lost the second one. What was the second thing that you described that for you is the big difference between prototyping and exploration?
So prototyping is like you have a known defined quantity of what you're trying to do, and exploration is just kind of wandering around trying to acquire new knowledge and information and perhaps discover something new. I guess they're both
So
forms of
both.
discovery, but like the success criteria for them is quite different. And I think that means that the types of tooling and kind of environment you want for each of them is also quite different.
Okay, fair. Johnny, do you have a differentiation between exploration and prototyping, or would you say it's pretty much the same for you?
I don't know. Kris is a linguist, so he's gonna, slice hairs here. He's gonna split hairs here, but for me, they're kind of the same thing. I mean, right now I'm in the middle of doing some prototyping, aka proof of concept, aka whatever kind of work, whereby I'm using Go to integrate and to try and to experiment with a third-party system to basically explore the edges of it, see whether it's going to suit my needs or not, right? So that is, to me, that is prototyping. So it's not a matter, so I'm not learning a programming language. I'm learning a system. I'm learning an API. I'm learning a product in this case. So that means I need to build something. So I have a very specific set of things that I'm trying to accomplish, and I use the best tool I know how to sort of experiment, right? So in that case, I use Go every day. So to me, having to define types before I get to use them, like I do it so often that it doesn't slow me, it doesn't hinder me, in any way, right? If I was learning Go, right, then I'd have to spend a bit more time, trying to understand the type system, trying to understand the quirks, the do's and don'ts, and all that stuff, right? Which to me is different. So it's like basically I'm going on site, right, to do a job. And I'm bringing my tools. I'm bringing my hammer. I'm bringing my saws. I'm bringing my whatever, right? Like I'm not learning how to use a saw, or I'm not learning how to use a hammer on the job. I'm at a job site trying to accomplish something. If the analogy makes sense.
That's a good one. Be anything to add, or you take those definitions of prototyping versus exploration?
Yeah, I think there's a distinction between learning and learning to use a tool you already know in a different way. The baseline of how much stuff you need to set up beforehand is going to be very different. Because if you're learning to use a different tool, you don't need to be productive. You're just learning to speak language. If you're trying to use a tool you already know in order to accomplish something, then you're going to have some expectations for yourself as in terms of what you managed to accomplish or not. So like what I was saying before we lost connection before is that like me, when I'm trying to play with something new, first thing I do, I want to make sure it runs on all my computers, because who knows if I'm going to be here or there or whatever on any given day. So like I have an expectation that whatever I'm working on needs to run on every computer. Another thing is like I was saying before, I don't want to have to reload stuff by hand, because that just feels silly. It just takes my concentration away. So I don't want to like Docker, whatever, something, kubectl, blah, 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 to rerun the thing I wanted. I want it to just like refresh instantly. if I'm experimenting with a new system. So for example, the other day, I was learning some stuff for like a 8088 assembly programming in DOS. And the thing is, I couldn't figure out a way to make DOS restart itself every time I did the coding, and that just drove me insane, because I was like, so you're telling me every new thing I type here, I'm gonna have to stop thinking about that and like restart the thing, et cetera, et cetera. So like, there's an expectation of productivity because I was trying to do something I already know to achieve an objective. But if I was just like, oh, how do I, let's say I'm learning generics in Go, I just want to see how, like, what does this do? Then I wouldn't have an expectation. To me, the difference between whatever the two words were, exploration, what? To me, the difference is that the expectation. Yeah, okay. For me, the difference is like the expectation you have for your own, what you're going to accomplish in that session.
Cool. Okay, interesting. Almost feels like this is what would be the first question of the episode about prototyping, but I'm glad we got there. So we said, now that we have the goal of playing with something, that not trying new tools, but trying to either explore new features of the tool, but also reach a specific objective. Does it change your answer to the question, what requirements would you have from language? Or is it still simple to do the feedback loop? Is it still same for no types and so on? So kind of more.
It's whatever you're fastest with, right? Like I know some people who who write Java and they can use Java to prototype like crazy. Like they're fast. They know how to get things set up. They have project templates. They can fire it off. They know how to be productive with it, right? I think, which for me, if it's perhaps the most important trait, right? Whatever tool you're using, right, does the tool fall, so basically, does the tool not get in your way? Are you proficient enough that whatever tool you're using, you can get done what you're getting done without fighting the tool itself, right? So whatever the language that is, whether it's Java, JavaScript, Ruby, Python, whatever, right? Lisp, right? If that's your jam and you can be productive and you can get things done quickly, then that's your tool. For me, I use Go every day, so Go is my omni tool, and I use it for all the things, right?
Yeah, I guess I would I would add to that, like, what if there's only one language you're fluent in, then that is the language that is best for prototyping for you. If there are multiple languages that you are fluent in, then that's, I think, when you get into more of the trade-offs between different things depending on the type of mindset that you want to be in at a particular time. Like if you're building a system that needs to do low-level access to hardware, Python is probably, if you're fluent in like Python and Rust is probably going to be a bit easier for you to use there than Python would be, or maybe even C. Like if you're going to go program an Arduino, there are things like the Python SDKs and libraries that you can use. But if you understand C at the same level you understand Python, then C would probably be a better fit there. But if you don't know C and you're fluent in Python, then you should just use Python because that's what you're fluent in. So I think that the important mark there is like, how fluent are you in the particular languages that you're assessing? Because if the answer is not fluent, then you're going to have a rough time prototyping in that language, even if it's quote unquote a good fit for prototyping the particular thing you want to prototype.
Counterpoint. I think one thing to take into consideration is that, like, for example, speaking of human languages, all humans talk about the same stuff, like across the world. Basically, you just have to figure out what is the right words to say this thing in, I don't know, Chinese, but like I'm sure everybody in China talks about dinner just as we do over here. So like that was a very bad metaphor. It was so bad that I'm proud of it. What?
I really want to say that fun fact. Can I interrupt you, please?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
In Mandarin, when you say, are you okay? Or did you eat? You ask, did you eat rice? End of
Thank you, Natalie, for sharing that. But what I wanted to say is that sometimes you need to choose a language not for your fluency with it, but for what it can do out of the box. So for example, for me, C is a read language. I often read stuff in C, but I never write it. And the other day, I was going to try to write something, and I realized I don't have all the string facilities in C out of the box that I have with Go. And I'm sure all the C programmers listening to this are going to be, oh, you should do this, you should do that, it's easy. And yeah, sure, but like I didn't know that like off the top of my mind, so I couldn't do all the string stuff in C that I was used to be able to do in Go. So that was very frustrating to me. So in that case, maybe I should use a language that has more built-in stuff out of the box to do the thing that I want to do, which is what Kris was saying, like Python versus C for low-level stuff. So that's one thing. Another thing is, for example, the other day, I was helping someone who's learning to program how to do stuff in, what is that thing called? There's like a programming environment that is very cute, and you can make like little dinosaurs walk around, and you drag and drop the if else blocks together. Anybody remember the name of that? Yeah, that.
Scratch.
Yeah, Scratch. So like I had never used Scratch before, but it has all the primitives and built-ins for what to do. And because of the thing that I was saying, that whatever language you speak, you kind of always try to say the same things. I could very easily Google how to do this or that in Scratch. So I was just Googling things. I was not as fast as I would have been in Go, but I could get the things done. But it was just so much easier to get to the objective because all the primitives were there. So like, I need a function to move my dinosaur from here to there. There was a primitive already built in on Scratch. I need a thing to make a little sound or whatever. I had a primitive there. So in that case, I was not fluent at all in the language, but because the language had so much to offer towards my objective, then it became, if I could have done that in more work, figure out Scratch.
So interesting. A little bit from the ease of yourself as the person who's doing that, which is like you're fast at this language, or you need to pre-plan versus not, into a little bit the kind of ecosystem around that. So it has the libraries or whatever representations that you find of things. How about something like the other parts of the puzzle? Like, is the team that you're working with, will they be happy to contribute to that or adopt it, and does it fit into the tech stack that we're being prototyped to be part of? Are these considerations that are relevant, or is this as far?
No, if you're a good enough rock star, you don't need a team. The team can, get lost.
Are you a 10x developer, V?
I'm a product manager.
The 10x developer is now gone. There was an article that got written on it. We had that interview with the people on changelog. There's no more 10x developers. We stopped making those a couple days ago.
Did we?
No. Now we require them all to be over 9,000. So that's a nerdy joke that some people will get.
Yes.
We'll leave the reference in the show notes for those who don't.
For those who don't.
For those who
didn't
watch anime in the 90s.
Right.
Do you think of the rest of the stack from the side of, will it be compatible at all with the other tools that you have already in place, and like with the preferences of the other people involved in this? Or is this less of a consideration when it comes to prototyping?
I think it depends on what prototyping you're doing. Like, are you prototyping I guess this is definitionally the thing, is like, are you prototyping something just for yourself, or are you prototyping something as part of a team? So I think a lot of the same dynamics that I said before about like fluency and appropriateness of the language for the fit. Like I think your point's a really good bit of nuance on what I said, V, of like, oh, like if there's a tool that you're not as fluent in, but it's still the productivity gains you'll get are much higher, then it's probably worth making that trade-off. And I think the same is true of a team, where if there's something that the team doesn't know super well, but they'll be able to use it in a productive way, then that might be better over a tool or a language that they're already very much established in. But I think the same general rules apply of, use the thing that the most people are fluent in, or that you can reasonably get the most number of people fluent in. I think it's even more important to have fluency when you're communicating between people, because if you are trying to use something new and no one on the team understands how the thing works, that can be very confusing and eat up a lot of time of being like, well, I read this Stack Overflow post that said we should do it this way, and someone's like, well, I wrote this Medium article that says we should do it this other way. So having some level of fluency can definitely be helpful there. But I think a lot of the things apply with that added layer of make sure that you can both read and write it rather fluently, or at the same level as everybody else. Because if you write something and someone else that you're prototyping with can't read that code or doesn't understand it, that can also slow things down quite a bit.
The only question you should ever ask yourself with regards to technology or language or whatever it is,
oh boy,
is my prototype going to end up in production?
The answer to that question should always be no.
And it's always yes.
Yeah, somehow.
Ship it. The point of a prototype is to acquire information so then you can go discard it and build the real thing. And
the business doesn't care. They see something that works, ship it.
Yeah. But I feel like it's on us as software people to not let the business do that.
I think in my experience, when it comes to team setting, the most important part of the earlier stages is to make sure that people are only allowed to do a very tiny amount of things. Like when you have the bigger the team, the more constraints you need for things to not get out of hand. So for example, sometimes, for example, speaking in terms of like developer experience and setting up environments for groups and companies, you usually you have like a team that, for example, you have a developer experience team. They set up the environments, and the first rule you're ever going to find is developers are not allowed to change the environment. The environment's going to be the same for everybody. Don't change anything, and that helps a box, let's say, and not go too crazy, so that things still work in between team members. And I think like if we go back to why was Go invented in the first place, if we go read the history, a lot of it was because C++ is too complicated when you're just out of school. People do all kinds of weird stuff. Go has a smaller number of primitives, and you can only mess up so much. And then that was one of the reasons that for Google, it was easier to like just standardize on a language that is simpler in terms of how much stuff there is. So I think we have a good rule of thumb that if you're prototyping with a team, trying to make the number of moving parts smaller is generally the best.
So given this is a Go podcast, let us ask the question that most people are dying for us to answer. Is Go a great prototyping tool?
No.
I can answer the question
of course it is.
Go.
Like,
that's a biased answer, sir.
I mean, we're on Go Time. We're on Go Time. This is the Go podcast. If you ask this question in JS Party, if they said Go, they would also be correct, but they wouldn't say Go.
Are those folks still having a party over there?
I'm going to put on my PM hat. To prototype what? You can't answer if you don't know what you're working with.
So what is it good prototyping? What is good to prototype with it?
I think that's the right question.
I mean, it depends. Depends quite a lot. I think because there's Go libraries to do basically anything you do with a computer in Go. Like it's gonna be rough. Like if you're trying to prototype a bootloader, possible in Go, yes. Should you do it in Go? No. But most other things, I think, reasonable. Like if we're gonna build a backend server or a network service or a command line utility, I think those are all good. Even GUI applications now, like we have the APIs and the libraries to do that. Even embedded programming, we have TinyGo and other things to be able to do that. Even browser with WASM, right? Like we have the space that Go inhabits is pretty wide. I think the only thing that I would be like, don't prototype that in Go use something else would be firmware that is like running on a very constrained thing. Like I don't know if I'd really want to be running TinyGo for like, once again, like my bootloader or something like that, where you have to be very, 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 very conscious about how much space you're using and how many resources you have, because you don't get a lot of control of that in Go, and it might be a little bit tough. But anything else, I think, like even Arduino programming, I think is fine.
Go is terrible. I mean, I'm a bit out of the loop here, but Go doesn't have, for example, 3D libraries out of the box. Like if you're doing like any kind of gaming, like a game engine, you don't have that out of the box. You don't have something like a what is it called, Bootstrap? Like you don't have like a web buttons thingy out of the box in Go. The templating library out of the box is like, dude, it's 2023. Yeah. You don't use Go templates. Like that's just silly. I mean, Go is it's really not all there. Like
you're trolling,
it's
right?
just missing so much stuff. You're just missing so much stuff.
I want all the batteries included.
Great way of showing how it can be the right tool for the right mission, but also how it can be the wrong one. That's a great way of making a point.
Yeah, I mean, all the AI stuff, like the GPU stuff, do we have that out of the box and Go? We don't. You're gonna have to go and waste a week trying to figure out which one's the best. If we're talking about, for example, you need some distributed stuff, like maybe an application running on a billion different places at once, then you're gonna need all the access control. You're gonna need all the encryption stuff. Let's say you're in the government, you're going to need your crypto libraries to be compliant with, for example, FIPS and a bunch of regulations like that. You don't have none of that stuff out of the box. So, I mean, I think, honestly, Go is just a really bad language in general, but especially for prototyping.
You don't have blockchain primitives. You don't have
exactly
any of the good stuff.
Oh, my God.
I mean, ironically,
to be honest, blockchain is super 2022. Like we've moved on to like NFTs and then like AI. So, but still, same point applies.
Such a bad language.
I've been just really craving getting yelled at on Twitter. So like, that's what I'm going for.
I believe you mean X, formerly known as Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I realized today that referring to Twitter as my ex, air quotes, actually works pretty great. Like, I just posted some racy I just shared some racy pictures with my ex. Like, it sounds just as bad. Or like, I just told my ex that I've been listening to, these depressive songs from 2005. Like, is it worse if you're referring to X or to your ex? Like,
my ex is toxic. Kind of works too.
We're a little off the rails, just slightly.
Oh.
Speaking of rails.
No.
Natalie's like, nope, don't do it.
What are some bad considerations when evaluating a prototyping language? So 5 bad considerations would be popularity, over-optimization, complexity, personal bias, and vendor lock-in. What other bad considerations are there?
Who doesn't want to be locked in?
The X.
I don't think lock-in is necessarily if you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I feel like lock-in is one.
It may get you where you want to get a lot faster and a lot easier, and that gives you knowledge, and with that you can make more informed decisions. So especially in the discovery phase, if you can learn what you need to learn faster, that's fine. Before you commit the whole business to whatever you're going to get locked into.
Yeah, move quickly.
And hopefully not break anything.
And pay good money to your vendors.
Yeah, just keeping the economy going. That's cool.
Exactly. Generate jobs.
How about over-optimization?
In our prototype?
Yeah, that's you can choose the really, really, really right tool for this task that you have, but you can find yourself going down this the rabbit hole of over-optimization. So how far down do you go before you stop and say that's a good enough choice?
I mean, unless you're prototyping in order to get an optimal solution, right? The prototype could be how fast can I make this, or how memory efficient can I make this, or CPU efficient can I make this. Then in which case you're definitely going in the deep end.
How about personal bias? Using what you like, not what's needed. This is bad.
I mean, if it's just for a prototype, I don't know if it's bad, right? Like, I guess that's part of it, right? Like, aren't prototypes the places where we should explore a little bit more, try some things out? I mean, if that prototype's going to wind up in production, then don't do that. But prototypes don't belong in production.
Or you can just climb the ranks, high enough that, you make your biases, mandates, and nobody has to question anything you say. Just say, hey, from now on we're using hack, and everybody has to, transition the code base from whatever they had, Java, Node, whatever, to now start writing some PHP. We're running hack.
I do feel like it's a bit difficult to strike a balance between, because sometimes it's just like everybody has to write the same language because we want to have maximum efficiency, and other times it's like everybody can write whatever language they want, right? That's the promise of microservices and Docker, and it seems like both those camps are wrong. And there should be room for exploration and option, but it seems like for things that are going to wind up in production, there should be that person that's like, no, we're going to use the boring tech, the stuff we know well, and we're going to make sure that, this thing is going to be able to be run and maintained and tested, and we can add new features and all of that. And I don't think that we should apply that to prototypes. I think that prototype should be the place where you can venture out, and I think that people at the top, or like more senior level engineers, should let people explore a bit more, because you might stumble upon a new technology you didn't think would work for you, and you can transition and move, because some languages you might be really good at, but maybe we don't all want to be like Facebook and be stuck on PHP in 2023. I guess technically they're using hack now, but still.
I think something important to be aware of is people who have a lot of experience and are very confident, they tend to make decisions that are really good if everybody else had the experience that they do, but nobody else does. So a lot of people, they reinvent the wheel to a huge extent, which, like, if we had 10 of that person, fine, it would be easy to do, but we don't. And everybody has a lot of experience with Go, and they think, oh yeah, Go doesn't have this stuff out of the box, but we can just write our own. This is easy, we can do it. I could do it, so I'm sure my team can do it. And no, they can't. That's going to be a huge rabbit hole you're going to get stuck in. So just use, the other language that has all this stuff out of the box already available. When talking about personal bias, I think that personal bias is not necessarily about what you like, but about how much you assume that everybody else knows just because you do. Yeah, I'm not sure what's the best way to counter that, but I think extremely smart people have a problem where they think everyone else is as smart as they are, or experienced, or use whatever term you want. And oftentimes, as we can see with Go has a lot less primitives than most languages, and that's a good thing because that makes it accessible. And I think a personal bias that is particularly dangerous is assuming everybody else can do whatever you personally have experience with.
That's cultural though, right? Because if I'm really good at articulating myself, I'm really good at convincing other people, right? Even if somebody doesn't have the same experience as I do, I can convince them that, oh no, it'll be just fine, right? And you outline a series of things, of reasons, right, why they will be just fine, right? So if you're not in a team culture or company culture where dissent is sort of not frowned upon, right? Or where sort of a dialogue is welcome, or questioning everything, right, good or bad, right, is welcome, then of course everybody's gonna be like, well, not my fight, not my I don't have a dog in this fight. Sorry for those animal lovers. You're gonna be like, I don't have any skin in the game for this decision, right? So you're just gonna go along with it, right? Or maybe you don't think you think you're too low down the totem pole to be able to question something that's coming from 3, 4, 5 levels above you or something like that, right? So I think it all depends on culture, whatever culture your engineering team has.
I mean, I think that probably most engineering teams have this problem with kind of what you're saying, Johnny, where there's basically blinders for people that have been around a lot longer, because we have this sense that seniority is based on time. But as you grow in time, you become more invested in the things that you know, the things that you use. And once again, you're right. People do start believing that like everybody knows this. Like I know this. So everybody must know this thing. And I think that's actually where prototyping can have a kind of equalizing advantage if you allow it to, in that anybody can prototype something. Anybody can try building and be like, hey, here, look at this thing that I built. And therefore you should probably like relax the rules around it, because it's a little like prototyping the next feature you want to have in some new weird thing. If it fails, okay, whatever, you didn't build that feature. But if you instead are being like, oh, well, we're going to change the entire database that we use for our whole system, you probably don't want to do that on just a whim. But you also probably don't want to be stuck with the same database forever if it doesn't fit your needs anymore. So there's like this equalization that needs to happen between the people who are senior by time being there and the new people who come in. I think that prototyping is a space where we can actually make that happen. But I think that's kind of a broader problem with the way that we structure engineering departments. So I don't even know if it's a cultural problem as much as it is an organizational structure problem. Or it could very much be both.
Yeah, this reminds me of something that I was thinking not long ago, that like sometimes we have an issue when doing things as a team that we're not aware of the team we have, because teams change really fast, especially in tech. Everybody's changing jobs all the time, and like this year you didn't even change your job, but this year you have one team, next year your team's completely different. I was like, I was thinking back to a time when I had a team where basically everybody was a genius, and you could just tell them, hey, just do this thing, and they would figure it out, and they would go and study the possibilities, blah, blah, blah. But like, you could give them a one-liner and they would build you the entire thing. But often you don't have that team. Often you have to go talk to your people and be like, what is missing here? How much information do I need to tell you to make sure you understand what's needed? And I'm speaking from a PM point of view, but this applies to like all levels. Let's say, if you wanna prototype something and it works for you, maybe you hand that prototype off to somebody later. They're gonna have no clue what to do with that, because they just don't have the assumptions that you do, and they won't understand the point you're trying to make when they see that proof of concept, let's say. But yeah, this is not a prototyping question. It's an environmental, social question of how we communicate with our teams. But I think especially in a team setting, you have a prototype, the prototype does X, you think the fact that it runs communicates something to other people, but it likely won't communicate everything you think it does. Was this too abstract? Did it make sense?
No, I think that actually brings up a good counterpoint to what I said earlier about like the thing you're most fluent in. Because if the thing you're trying to do with the prototype is communicate things with people, you should choose something you're very much not fluent in and force yourself to actually document your thinking and your struggles, right? Like, I feel like people would be more likely to write down comments and notes and kind of describe their thinking if they're trying to figure out how to use a new language or something than they are with something they're familiar with. Right? If you're familiar with it, it's just like, oh no, I know this thing. I don't need to write down what this particular piece of code is doing. But if you're not familiar, like, oh, I want to do this thing, you might jot down a little bit of notes. This function does X, Y, and Z, and then you write it out. And then so the next person who gets you, who might also not have a lot of knowledge or context around it, might think, oh, okay, this function is supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z, and they kind of piece things together more easily. So I think that can be like a downside of a lot of fluency, is that you probably are not going to document things as well as you might otherwise.
Yeah, it's like you show your colleague like 5 lines of regular expressions and you just say, you get it, right?
I mean, these days, I mean, I think even that is gonna become less important. Kris, what you said is less important. I'm calling you out on that right now. Here's why. I can literally go into a foreign code base, clone it down, open it up in VS Code, highlight the piece of code or pieces of code that I want to understand, and right click and said explain with Copilot. Without knowing anything about whatever it is, right? Now I may not understand the domain, right, that the code is working within, right? I mean, you still have to understand what business is this, what problem domain am I in. That's gonna come with time, and regardless of how well documented a piece of code is, you're still gonna have to spend time understanding the business that you're in. But just algorithmically tell me what this code is doing, even though I don't understand the intricacies, the regular expression, the symbols. I don't know what that I may not need to know anything about. I can just highlight the code and say, hey, tell me what this is doing. And it will do a pretty darn good job of explaining what the code does. So documentation, I don't know. I think documentation is going to take a hit in the age of AI.
I think
because we're just going to let AI do it.
Ooh, I think that's a hot take that I vehemently disagree with. I think in the age of AI, we need more documentation, not less, like way more, because you're having this thing explain this code to you, but that tells you nothing about what the person's intent was, right? That doesn't tell. It tells you this is what this code does, and it can help you understand that. But that might not be what the person actually wanted the code to do, right?
They did it wrong. Because if the machine can tell me exactly what the code is doing and that's not what the person intended, somebody is wrong.
Yeah. And it's the machine in this case, because you wrote a bug. Like, you wrote the thing wrong. Yes, you've written it wrong. If you have documents or you have documentation saying this is what I meant it to do, then the person can look at it and be like, oh, this isn't doing the thing it's supposed to be doing. Let's go figure that out. If you never wrote that, then the thing's going to tell you this is what this thing does. And you're like, okay, but how do I know if that's right or wrong? Right? Like, yes, AI is very helpful. Like these algorithms and models and all that are very helpful as a tool to help enhance your understanding, but they don't replace the underlying need to have the actual understanding exist, right? You need to write that down somewhere. And I think the more that we do things with AI, the more that we depend on AI to explain things to us, the harder it's going to be for us to actually understand things. And it has a significant error rate in what it tells you, right? I know we call it hallucination. It's not really hallucinating. It's a predictive thing, right? You're using a predictive system. And most of the time we only use predictive systems when we have to, right? Like, you could have a hash map that is 99.99% correct, but I would not want to use that hash map if I have one that's 100% correct. Like if 1 out of 10,000 inserts I do into this hash map is going to get lost, I don't really want to use that. I would prefer to use one that's going to make sure it doesn't lose the stuff I put into it. So we shouldn't.
It depends on my tolerance, though. It's my tolerance. Like, what do I have tolerance for, right? If that 0.01% costs me, $1,000, but 99.99% of the time, right, it's generating 100 million. I don't care about that 0.01%.
That is true, but like in this case, that's not like we're talking about should I have written down documentation versus should I have the AI do it for me? The cost of having the AI do it for you is far higher than you just writing down what you were thinking. Because if you did write a book, you can find it. But
we disagree there.
I think the main issue with AI is that it's always going to be one lower than the current frontier. So for example, you could have AI that can accurately describe with 100% certainty what any bit of assembly code does, of machine code. So let's say we had that in, I don't know, the early 90s. So like any bit of machine code, the AI can 100% tell you what it does 100% correctly 100% of the time. Okay, that's good. But then the industry is going to move to microservices, and suddenly individual instructions are worthless. What's in play is the interactions between multiple separate bits of computation, let's say, and then the AI is not going to be able to describe that correctly until we can as humans, because it's going to learn from us. It's not going to teach us. We need to generate knowledge first, and then AI learns from it. And then let's say one day AI learns to do that, and it can describe those interactions perfectly. Now let's say, okay, I'm working on a system. We have 3,000 VMs across the world. There's firewall rules that are absolutely insane to communicate, and like service meshes and all of that stuff. Until we can document that, AI is not going to figure it out. AI is not a system that can create solutions. It can learn and replicate them. So I'm sure that AI can always help you with whatever solved problem you're dealing with, but it cannot solve the problems as you move up in the complexity of the world as that complexity expands.
I mean, I think it's also slightly worse than that, because I think we have a tendency to see the output of something that most people see as objective, like AI, and be like, that thing is correct, right? Like if I read a comment and that comment doesn't match the code, I might be like, okay, one of these things is incorrect. I'll maybe go talk to the person, but I won't immediately assume which one is correct. Or I might have a slight preference for thinking, okay, this comment is probably correct and the code just got shifted in some way. But if I have some code and I have the AI explaining it to me and the AI explains it wrong, I think people will have much more of a deference to the AI system, because they're like, well, this thing understands something that I clearly don't understand. So if it's blatantly lying to your face about what it's doing, I think people will still, what the code does, I think people will still be deferent to it and say, I'm not seeing something that this is seeing. It must be correct, right? And I think it goes back to my point about probabilistic things. I think it's fine to use a probabilistic algorithm to do this if everybody understands that it's probabilistic. But I don't think that's how AI has been sold, and I don't think that's how people subconsciously process what the answers that AI gives them. Hence the term hallucination in general, right? Hallucination implies that people believe that the fact that it has given you an answer that turned out to be wrong is a bug in the way the thing works. It's not a bug in the way the thing works. It's a part of the nature of what it is doing. And so I think I think it's like we got to be more careful with the whole AI thing. And also, I think you're right, V. Like, it can't describe things it hasn't seen before, and there's a lot of effort that goes into like describing stuff to AI systems and getting everything into its context and its databases and all of that. But if you're building something new, then it might not be able to tell you about it, or might get confused by what's there.
I mean, just today I was talking to a customer and they were saying, oh, there was this thing that y'all have listed as a severity 10 CV, but for us it was a severity 0 because we had these other measures in place, and actually upgrading it was bad because changed a bunch of other things, etc., etc. So it's like, is an AI ever going to figure out that mess? I don't think so. Not until there's a pattern to it, and the whole point is that there's no pattern to it. It was just a crazy thing.
So I
Talking about
can
statistics, I want to quote one research that I don't know if you are familiar with. Cosmic ray bit flip. Are you all familiar with it?
Yeah, that's why we have ECC RAM.
So space radiation can change bits, which will affect memory. Specifically, a research from 2010 estimates that a computer with 4 GB of commodity RAM has a 96% chance of experiencing a bit flip within 3 days. But on memory, we rely blindly.
I mean, this is why we have error correcting RAM, though, right? Like, we saw that problem, and we're like, if you care about RAM being correct all of the time, then you use this other type of RAM.
Second degree verification, but it sounds like something you can do with AI, right? Explain this function, another AI, explain the same thing. Do you agree?
Yeah, there's definitely ways to mitigate it. I'm not saying that like we shouldn't use AI here. I'm just saying we should be much more careful about how much deference we give to it. In the same way with RAM too, right? Like with hard disks are even worse at this, where they will just straight up lie to you about what they persisted. And if you lose power, you just lose all this data, right? It's like we have to understand that the systems are not infallible. And we need to understand the boundaries of that infallibility. Once again, like, I don't know, writing a disk also is something you expect to be persistent, but it's not. So yeah, sometimes we can't touch RAM, and often you can't trust the AI. I guess my broader point is, sure, use the AI, but also writing comments about why you put something in a certain way in your prototype is a good idea. Extra levels of defense.
If I'm prototyping, like an AI helper is good enough. I would say, and in most cases, it is good enough. So that's why I think, rather than a language, a framework, or any particular tool, I think a thought partner, a code completionist, a logic suggester, whatever it is that can take my comment and produce code based on patterns that it has consumed way more than I could possibly in a lifetime, that I can rely on its output for most things. Yes, should I verify? Yeah, that's part of my productionization process, right? You should double check, make sure the algorithm is correct, make sure it's doing the right thing, especially if I'm doing something mission critical, or if it's something important, like maybe writing software for medical devices or something, right? I don't want somebody's heart ticker to misfire because I relied solely on AI generated code, right? So again, context for that, right? But for most of the time, I'll prototype with an AI partner any day.
I mean, yeah,
Johnny,
throw out the code.
Wait, Johnny. Knowing what you know about how AIs learn, would you trust an AI to know how to do something if you're trying to do it for the first time? If you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't look like anybody has addressed before?
See, but the way I solve problems is I break them up into very small pieces, and I solve those pieces individually. And I think AI is very good at that. Right? You give it a small problem to solve, and then you start building blocks together, right? Because that's how I use it today, right? I don't say, hey, I have an idea for a service, generate all the things for me, and it spits it out. I'm like, great, ship it. No, I take what it gives me piece by piece. So
what you're saying is you're going to use AI to generate the sentences, but not to tell the story.
Correct. That's still me. That's still my job.
I mean, what you're describing is a compiler, right? That's what we call it an AI. It's a compiler. Like, this is exactly what compilers do. It takes something in one language and transforms it into a thing in another language, which is exactly like, I've written a sentence in English. Please turn this into runnable code for me. So it's, we can call it AI, but it's just a compiler.
And the other day I wrote a sentence in German. It was wild.
Technically, translation systems are also compilers. It's just a... But yeah, I think if you look at it that way, for actually generating the code, okay, yeah, it's just a fancy compiler. understand some English, can kick out some nice code at the other end. You check to make sure it's right. I mean, how much of us check the machine code our compilers spit out? Like after a while, it gets good enough where it's probably okay. But I don't know. I don't like all the phrasing around AI. I'm like, what about the actual technologies? Can we talk about
That's
that?
because you don't own enough stocks.
No.
You need
That
the
is a
hype else
whole
the
new
stocks don't go
episode.
up.
I know, man.
Point. I know that's
Oh, wait.
Q. This is a Q.
Wait,
for-
are we supposed to be talking about?
I actually think you should probably leave.
So AI, right? Is that an unpopular opinion for anyone?
What do you like? AI as a whole?
Kris hates AI. You heard it here, folks, on Go Time.
I have issues with AI. Yes, I have issues with how AI is used, mostly because it's used.
Is that your unpopular opinion
Poorly.
for now?
I don't know if it should be unpopular, but it probably is. Like, I don't know. We use AI to like sentence people to jail, and that's terrible. And we should stop doing that. But in general, I guess my unpopular opinion would be stop calling it AI and just call it by the underlying technologies that you're using. Like, I think I've said this before. I don't like that we have this hype cycle around AI and everybody's just taking a whole bunch of companies are like, we're using AI now. It's like you were using algorithms before. You're not doing anything different. So I think actually calling it by the things that they are and being much more precise, like Apple's been doing this in like their keynotes where they refuse to say AI and they'll be like, we're using transformers or this or that or a neural engine or what have you. I think that's a lot better because I think it makes it more practical and tangible for people. When you say AI, I think it's a lot easier to get bamboozled or swindled or trick yourself into thinking that things that are actually impossible are possible because AI.
That is exactly why the term AI is used. I mean, we all know when we talk about AI, we think of the underlying technology and we're like, well, okay, yeah, generally speaking, AI for the lay people. But like we know, so I don't think we should shy away from that. The same way, like when the whole serverless thing first came about, like we knew there were servers doing stuff in the back end, but to communicate it, to market it, to make money go up and all that, like you need a nice simple term, right, that everybody can rally around, that tech journalists can write about, right? You can lump that all behind AI.
Okay.
Well,
So more unpopular opinions.
I'm not going to say this is my opinion or that I agree with it. I'm just going to say it's a very unpopular opinion. So that's the disclaimer. Hype is not only good, but necessary. For example, if you go back to the 60s and you talk about the space race, imagine if the public perception was, well, it's just like a car engine. It's very inefficient and it puts out a lot of fire, and then the thing goes up. Like, the moon is just a rock. You're just gonna bang your engine there, and
What's the problem?
You need the hype to get people motivated to do things and to take unreasonable risks that change the status quo. And without the hype and the overhype and the people over investing in things that they shouldn't and so on, things would never change. Like, look at Germany. Germany is a country where things never changed and nobody's excited about anything. That is the whole German ethos. Nobody's excited about anything ever. And it's the same country. People are still using faxes. Look at the bureaucracy of the thing. I think if you look at why the US is the biggest economy in the world, it's because people get hyped up for anything. Like, oh, you can now buy water in a Coca-Cola can or whatever that thing is called. And everybody's like, holy shit, it's water, man. It's so cool. Like, I mean, sure, 99% of things are silly, but the 1% of things that actually make change, they come from the same primordial soup of hype that exists for out of thin air. So, smartphones weren't a thing. Why did they become a thing? Because everybody was like, yeah, the iPhone, man, it's crazy. was not crazy. It was just a silly tiny computer that didn't do anything special. And then like every big change like that was just a silly little thing that's not any, like, I mean, why do we care about computer? Like, why do we care about Go? It's just the same crap as before, packaged up differently with a new label and a cute mascot that time. So yeah, let's hype the bejesus out of everything. And if you can make money in the process, then good for you. And if you can't, well, that life, nobody said life was going to be fair. So, suck it up.
Sucks for you.
Oh,
Was that unpopular? I think I got unpopular a little bit.
Yeah, you captured the gist of it. Yeah.
That's unpopular with me.
Made a good argument for why does that make sense. So it's going to be hard to make it unpopular.
It's gonna be easy to make it unpopular. What? Hype is terrible. It's like a sugar high. It's like eating candy all the time. Like the actual change that happens in the world is done through a lot of just consistent investment over time, which is the antithesis of hype, right? You actually can't do long-term investment with hype.
If people won't stop eating chocolate, just buy stocks in Nestle or whatever.
Johnny, do you have an unpopular opinion?
Oh, did you ask me if I have an unpopular opinion?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't think it's gonna be unpopular because I think I made my case for it. But I think any sort of AI tooling or helper is the new prototyping tool. I don't think the language is gonna matter anymore. I don't think the frameworks, the whatever the tech stacks are, I don't think anything's gonna matter.
Wait, Johnny. Are you saying because of AI you're now amenable to using Java? Or JavaScript?
Ooh. You're calling me out here. I don't know. I don't know, maybe let me take that back.
Then I will finish with my unpopular opinion. When traveling, don't go to the restaurants with the highest ranks. Don't go to the restaurants with the lowest ranks as well, but just don't look at the ranks. Go somewhere not popular and just enter.
So you're like on the 5-star scale. You're like go to like the 4.6, not the 4.9 or 5.
Don't look at stars. Don't even look at the restaurant before you go in.
How do I know if I want the food that they serve?
Try.
Ask ChatGPT.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Let AI decide.
Thank you for joining the conversation on prototyping. That was interesting, and that was wide, as prototypes sometimes tend to go out of scope. So did this conversation, but it was very interesting, and we hope everybody who listened enjoyed. Goodbye.